I've been reading for weeks about the turnout at this Bearing Witness Vigil, but this is just incredibly moving. I want to thank the interfaith leaders in the Burlington area for being in many ways the foundation of this vigil. I want to thank Jared and Lori, my constituents, and I've had the honor to hear from both of them, as Jared mentioned, at a No Kings rally. And to Jared and Lori, I so appreciate your vision and your commitment through your particular faith, carrying it out in what you're doing today. So thank you so much for your incredible leadership. And I'm seeing so many of my other constituents here from Acton and Sudbury and Hudson and of course Maynard, and so greatly appreciate your being there, and people from all across this region. And as I think you already know, but I want to emphasize this, is that the power of peaceful protest, and I hope that you know that this is now one of the largest vigils, I think, not just in New England, but probably the entire country, standing against Donald Trump's mass deportation agenda. Please give yourselves a big round of applause. So I represent 12 communities, and as we all know, ICE is in pretty much every one of our communities, and that includes my hometown of Acton, that includes Maynard, but I also represent the city of Marlborough and the town of Hudson. And I mention that because listening to the poem read by the rabbi, as probably most people here are familiar, the city of Marlborough, the town of Hudson, has a particularly large Brazilian community, probably one of the largest outside of the Framingham area. Very proud to represent one of the largest Brazilian communities, not just in Massachusetts, but in the nation. But listening to that poem, I want to reinforce the devastating impacts it's had to the community. And it's not just myself getting a text or call every other day of another person getting picked up and arrested by ICE, another family ripped apart, and figuring out what I can do to support that family, but the impact it's had in the entire community. I so appreciate the work that people here are now doing around food insecurity. Well, I will tell you now that the Marlborough Community Cupboard, the food pantry that serves many Marlborough families, has seen a dramatic drop, particularly of Latino or Brazilian families, because of that fear about being targeted or picked up by ICE. We know that many children of Brazilian or Latino children in the Marlborough public schools are not going to school out of great fear. And you're seeing an impact on the entire community. And so it's just absolutely devastating to see, particularly in cities or towns where there's a large immigrant community, this incredibly devastating impact. Because in many ways I represent such a diverse district, I am very proud to be the Senate sponsor of the Safe Communities Act. And I'll talk a little bit about that later, the details, but I want to emphasize is that it's so important to make it very clear that the actions by ICE, the actions by the Trump-Vance administration are making every single one of our communities less safe, right? If immigrant families don't trust the police to call the police when they witness something they don't like in their neighborhood or witness a crime, that makes every one of us in that community and across the Commonwealth less safe. And so that is part of what the Safe Communities Act legislation is focused on, and I think is important as this vigil is here today. It's also so important to be advocating for state legislation to make sure that state and local law enforcement, to make sure our local and state taxpayer dollars are not collaborating with Donald Trump's mass deportation agenda. Now, in addition to serving as the Senate sponsor of the Safe Communities Act, I also serve as the Senate chair of the Criminal Justice Reform Caucus. And I mention that because what we know is that what is happening, and has been happening for years, particularly by President Trump, is that what the right wing is doing is criminalizing being an immigrant, and often being an immigrant of color. That is exactly what these arrests and detentions are happening. And the fact that a Supreme Court is allowing ICE to racially profile people, often by the color of their skin, is absolutely outrageous. But that's what's happening, right? That's what's happening. And I mention the Criminal Justice Reform Caucus because I want to emphasize the importance of your being here today, of bearing witness, but also what it means to so many immigrants, including those that are just behind me right now in detention. Is that last night I had the honor of attending a forum around prison college education at Boston College. Boston College just announced that they will now be providing college courses at MCI Framingham, so that incarcerated women, as much as we want to reduce those numbers, incarcerated women have the same opportunity as incarcerated men to get a college degree. But what was said at the forum last night by students, so people that had served time in prison and received that college degree, is that what they got from professors, what they got from volunteers, what they got from elected officials that were coming into the prisons is that sense of hope. That sense of hope that is so important to send to our immigrant communities, that we're standing in solidarity with them, that we're standing against the actions by the Trump-Vance administration, and that we fervently decry the mass deportation agenda happening right now in the United States of America. You are doing the same thing on immigration reform and supporting immigrants. And I know that specifically because I had the opportunity to talk to Representative Ken Gordon, the state rep here for Burlington, and I know he spoke here some time ago. And because he was accompanied by Congressman Seth Moulton and Congressman Jake Auchincloss, he had the opportunity to go into this horrific facility and had the opportunity to talk to some of the ICE and Homeland Security officials. And he, first of all, absolutely documented the conditions that Lori talked about earlier that are just detestable. But he also highlighted that those individuals who are coming through here every day from different communities arrested by ICE, those individuals, those immigrants, when they see all of you here, they're telling the stories to people already detained here, and that's given them all a sense of hope that they can fight what they're up against, their detention and their imprisonment. So I want to thank you for your leadership for that, and that you are having an impact. And I know that it can be incredibly frustrating, right? That there's not more we can do to stop these ICE agents, right? It's incredibly frustrating that they're able to mask themselves. It's incredibly frustrating they're not able to ID themselves. It's incredibly frustrating that we're not able to do more to stop them in our communities. But the peaceful protest, the observation, the witness is so important right now, and part of obviously a broad civil rights movement that's very proud to be here in this country. To support those efforts, we do want to pass state legislation, because there are ways that we can push back at the state and local level. And so what I want to emphasize is that we are having an impact at the state level. And going back to some of my constituents, just had a terrific victory this week. In the town of Littleton, I have a constituent, I'll just give his first name, David. He was granted entry here from Honduras because he had severe healthcare needs. So he had a form of temporary status. He had a work permit and was working at a local hospital. But because he did not have permanent status, ICE arrested him just outside when he was going to work. And David was transferred within a few days to a horrific ICE facility in Mississippi. And I was contacted by his roommate to see what I could do to help. So I was able to get him in touch with the Northeastern University Law Clinic that has been representing him. And through a habeas corpus petition, the judge in Mississippi, so we know how difficult that is, a judge in Mississippi granted him a bond, and he flew back to Logan Airport this past weekend. So there are things we can do to fight back, and the legislature, I am proud to say, in the budget, funded the Immigrant Defense Fund, $5 million to hire more immigration lawyers to represent people in detention. And although $5 million is just a drop in the bucket and we need to do a lot more, those grants are now going out to law firms, to nonprofits, to organizations like MIRA to hire more lawyers to represent people in court. That would not have happened without the advocacy of so many people here. And so I want to thank you for your advocacy in the budget this past spring. But now is the time to pass state legislation to better protect immigrant families in our Commonwealth. And so I'm very excited to announce, and this is the first announcement I have made, is that we just got a commitment that the Safe Communities Act is being heard by the Joint Committee on Public Safety on Tuesday, November 25th. It'll be at 11:30 a.m. at the State House. That's Thanksgiving week. I need you to come to the State House and stand up and advocate for that. But also, if you're not able to make it to the hearing, is talk to your state rep and state senator to co-sponsor the legislation and tell stories. Tell stories of your neighbors, of other immigrant families and their experiences to your legislators about the importance of that legislation. And that legislation, again, is making sure, first of all, that police are not allowed to ask the immigration status of anyone they interact with. That's not relevant to public safety work. It's to ban 287G agreements to prevent law enforcement from being empowered to act as immigration agents. Imagine how chilling that is. And that's happening in New Hampshire. You know, state and local police in New Hampshire are being deputized to act as immigration agents. So let's make sure that doesn't happen here. Informing immigrants that if they happen to get arrested, that they have the right to hire an immigration lawyer to represent themselves in court. So important. And finally, to make sure that police and court personnel are not informing ICE if someone in their courthouse, in their police station is undocumented. So those are the four things that the Safe Communities Act does. So we need to take action on this legislation. And as someone who has filed this bill for well over 10 years, it's critical to reach out to your state rep and state senator to advocate for this legislation. We need to make sure to stand up for Massachusetts values, to make sure that we are not collaborating, we are not aiding and abetting ICE's mass deportation agenda, that we reject Donald Trump's racist and xenophobic rhetoric and actions. And again, to bear witness that we will not allow these assaults on immigrant families, immigrant communities that's happening in so many places in Massachusetts. So thank you so much for being here. I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much to Jared and Lori for inviting me. And I'm just so proud of the work you're doing, peacefully observing, and peacefully making sure that we reject what is happening just behind me. Thank you so much.